Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we are unpacking something genuinely fascinating. We're looking at the hidden psychology of solitude. Have you ever wondered why some highly independent people truly, deeply prefer being alone? Like, for a lot of us, spending time in solitude feels like this ultimate safe haven, right? A place to finally just exhale. But the underlying reasons for this intense drive for independence might actually surprise you, because it almost always starts way before we even realize it.
Think about it. What if your preference for being alone isn't actually a personality trait at all? What if it's not just, how you're wired from birth, but rather a deeply ingrained pattern that started way back in childhood without you even noticing? We so often assume our fierce independence is just baked into our DNA, but the psychology? It suggests something entirely different.
Okay, let's dive into this because there's a major paradigm-shifting realization here. Some of the most independent people aren't naturally that way. They were trained. And once you see why, you really can't unsee it. Your solitary preferences are, in a lot of cases, brilliant childhood adaptations. It's like a giant puzzle. Let's look at the hidden patterns that explain why some of us just feel so much safer alone than with others.
Section 1. When connection felt unsafe, or relational trauma.
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at what happens when early relationships lack consistency. Imagine growing up literally not knowing which version of your caregiver you're going to get on any given day. One day, a spilled glass of milk is no big deal at all, and the next day, it triggers this massive, unpredictable outburst. Some days they're warm, other days they're distant, cold, totally unreachable. Your brain learns a very important survival-level lesson: connection isn't safe. This creates what we call insecure attachment. When love feels unpredictable, you don't run toward it, you pull away. Over time, you adapt. You become someone who keeps emotional distance simply because being alone is stable. Alone doesn't suddenly change on you.
And then there's this quieter kind of childhood experience. It leaves no obvious physical scars, but man, it shapes absolutely everything. It's when your emotions simply weren't truly seen. Think about times you were deeply upset as a kid, only to be told you were just overreacting. You tried to explain your feelings but got dismissed as being difficult. You just needed someone to listen, but no one really did. It is incredibly isolating when the very people meant to validate your feelings consistently ignore them.
Eventually, when your emotions are repeatedly ignored like that, you just stop. You stop explaining, you stop expressing, you stop expecting, and your brain writes this specific, ironclad rule for you: handle everything alone. As an adult, this shows up in subtle but incredibly powerful ways. You rarely open up. You process everything internally. When things get hard, instead of reaching out, you withdraw. Not because you don't need support, but because experience taught you it just wouldn't be there.
Moving into Section 2. Forced early emotional independence, or the premature burden.
Look, some people absolutely did not choose independence. They were thrust into it. As a kid, maybe you had to handle your own problems, making your own meals when you were barely tall enough to reach the stove, right? Navigating adult emotions, calming yourself down, or figuring out school issues entirely on your own. From the outside, as an adult today, this looks like incredible strength. You're capable, you're responsible, you are deeply self-sufficient. But underneath all that armor, there is very often a profound discomfort with vulnerability and depending on anyone else.
So the crucial point is this: needing help just didn't feel safe. It felt like being ignored, or worse, like becoming a burden. So what did you do? You adapted. You convinced yourself you didn't need anyone. In this context, being alone doesn't feel empty or sad at all. It feels controlled. It's a space where you are guaranteed not to be a burden and absolutely guaranteed not to be let down.
Section 3. The overwhelmed nervous system and social overload.
We also have to realize we don't all experience the world the exact same way. Some people are biologically wired to just feel things way more deeply and intensely. They notice subtle tone changes, they pick up on unsaid tension, and they literally absorb emotions that aren't even theirs. If you are a highly sensitive person and you grew up without the tools to process those intense feelings, the world can feel incredibly overwhelming.
Because of this sensitivity, being around others isn't just socializing, it's an absolute wave of stimulation. You're dealing with constant sensory input, you're constantly having to read the room, and you're processing unpredictable emotional noise. Imagine walking into a room and instantly feeling the unspoken argument that happened 5 minutes before you even got there. If your childhood environment was already tense, your nervous system adapted to be on high alert all the time. So, stepping back into solitude isn't avoidance for you. It's a necessary recovery mechanism. It's literally the only way for your mind to finally slow down.
Finally, Section 4. Choice versus default solitude. Let's reframe this. And this brilliantly illustrates where society often gets it totally wrong. Being alone is not the same as being lonely. Loneliness is the pain of lacking connection. But being alone, when it's intentional, is about control and selective connection. If you prefer solitude, it absolutely does not mean you're incapable of deep, meaningful relationships. You can love deeply, but you're selective, because you've learned the hard way that not everyone is safe.
When we stack all these patterns together, the insecure attachment, the emotional neglect, the forced early independence, the social overload, a completely different picture forms. You weren't born wanting to be alone. You adapted into it. At some point in your life, being by yourself simply felt safer than being misunderstood or let down. Actually, your mind protected you exactly as it was supposed to.
I just want to pause here for a second and let this sink in. You are not broken. There is absolutely nothing wrong with you. You aren't cold, and you aren't inherently distant.
What you actually did was learn to survive emotionally without depending on anyone else. And wow, that takes an immense amount of strength and resilience. Your intense independence is a profound survival tool that served a very, very real purpose.
But here's the trade-off we have to acknowledge. The exact same walls that protected you, they can also limit you. When you stop needing people, you also stop letting them in. Solitude might be where you feel grounded, sure, but it shouldn't be the only place you feel safe. You deserve connections that don't drain you, and relationships where you don't have to shrink yourself down just to avoid being a burden.
So look, the goal here isn't to force yourself to become this massive extrovert or socialize 24/7. The goal is awareness. We want to consciously shift away from defaulting to solitude, where it's this automatic fear-based retreat, to actively choosing it, where it becomes a calm, peaceful, and intentional act of self-care.
Which leaves us with this final, really powerful question to reflect on. Take a look at your own life and your own patterns. Do you choose solitude or do you default to it? Because once you see the difference, you don't just have to survive your independence anymore. You actually get to choose it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I hope this sparks some incredible insights for you.